Hello guys, welcome again to my channel. This is Adebisi Daudu, known as Shalom as an author. In today Living Beyond the Limit program module 1 series 13, we'll be looking into the summary of the programs, the objective of the programs, and the overall objectives of the programs. Now let's look into the summary, and it reads: Living Beyond the Limit module program is based on faith building, spiritual growth, and motivations that will enable the recipients of the module programs on how to understand or having an understanding of the mechanisms that will enable them to live beyond the limits and limitations of life. Also, being imparted with the mechanisms which are involved with the module programs will enable them to live beyond the limits and limitations of life. Meanwhile, there is the objectives of the programs, and it reads: the imparted are emotionally self-sufficient using the program modules living beyond the limit to impart into the non-emotional self-sufficient. Therefore, we have the overall objective of the program modules. Also, it reads: being emotionally self-sufficient is the beginning of creations and achieving destiny and purpose in life. Meanwhile, now let's look into the Series 13 program objectives, outcomes, skills, and knowledge. Now it reads the objectives: achieving the landmark of overcoming the limits. We all need to be a doer, someone that does something. Folding of arms will not enable anyone that need victories over the limits and limitations of life. Meanwhile, the outcomes reads: living beyond the limit. That's the program modules outcomes. Now, the program module skills is three: being a doer. In other words, the program modules knowledge reads: having an understanding of the field principles, how it works, and to be a man of the field, a doer, someone that does something. Similarly, now let's look into the recaps of series 12, which reads, and it says: the difference between prophet Elijah and the prophets of Baal is who they lies their confidence and hope with. At this point, we have a Bible verse, and it's been taken from the book of Genesis 27 verse 3, and it reads: now therefore take, I pray thee, the boughs, and go out of the field and take some versions. That's the Bible verse, being taken from Genesis 27 verse 3. In other words, now let's look into the series 13 content, which also reads: the first thing first, or the principles of living beyond the limit and limitation of life is to understand the field principles, how it works, and to be a man of the field, a doer. Meanwhile, it says a doer can be identified by someone that does something or occupied with things or activities that lead to a substantial result or achievement. Also, a doer can be identified as someone that is involved in an activity or that renders service to a private organizations or government institutions. Also, that are being rewarded for their service being rendered. In other words, living beyond the limits and limitations of life involving the understanding of the dual principles. Nothing will be achieved or obtained in life when one is not a doer, either in service rendered or to seek the face of God for a particular situations in life. At this point, we have a kind of a questions or paragraphs, and it reads: understanding the dual principles. Also, it says, at first, Isaac could not have beckoned on Esau for a version if Esau was not a man of the field, or someone that understood the field principles, someone that is a doer, that does something. Meanwhile, having an understanding of the dual principles or involved in doing something is the landmark of overcoming the limits and limitations of life. Also, it enables a man's destiny to move in line in every stage of life and providing victories at every endeavors of life. Therefore, also we have another kind of questions or paragraphs, and it reads, achieving the landmark of overcoming the limits. And it reads, we all need to be a doer, someone that does something. Folding of arms will not enable anyone that needs victory over the limits and limitations of life. We all need to be a doer and involved in doing something. The limit of life that anyone may be experiencing could be in spiritual terms or financial terms. Also, nothing will be achieved if one is not a doer, either to see the face of God, regard to strange occurrences, issues, or to do something that will lead to achieving substantial results regard to financial issues. Meanwhile, at this point, we are now approaching the end of the program modules, which indicating the end program modules that enable us to kind of understand what we have been taught or learned from. And it reads, end of program modules series 13, achieving the landmark of overcoming the limits. We all need to be a doer. Module 13 gave the importance of being a man of the field, a doer. Also, that's the end of the program module series 13. Also, we have a questions. At this point, I wouldn't know, maybe there's a question that you have that you would like to ask from me on this YouTube channel or my channel. You can drop a comment or questions regarding to either to dual principles or you to understand the meaning of being a man of a man of the field, or how you can achieve the result beyond the living beyond the limit and limitations of life. You can drop a comment which we can be able to elaborate and share more instances on how you can achieve your desirable results over the limits and limitations of life. Also, we have a post-assessment. Post-assessment reads, what is your first occupations? 2, what do you like doing? And lastly, what are you doing presently? With this post-assessment, I definitely believe that it will guide us on how we can definitely achieve the result over the limits and limitations of life. Also, this brings us to the end of Living Beyond the Limit programs module 1 to an end. In the next episode, we'll be looking into the Living Beyond programs module 2 that will also have like a 13 series or 12 series. Meanwhile, on the frames of my YouTube page, there's a link there, my website, which you can click on it, that will enable you to get into my website. That getting to it, there are lists of books that have been published by me. By clicking on it, it will direct you to the online or Amazon store, which you can definitely get materials regarding you living beyond the limits and limitations of life. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode, Living Beyond the Limit series, program 2. Thanks so much. Bye.